When I started the project, I'm not sure I realised how much it would grow and into what scale it would grow in order for me to make a production with the women. In February 2018, I started to run a weekly session with women from Oasis, and the groups ranged in sizes from 16 people to 2 to 6 to 8. And each time I met up with a new group or the same group of people, we looked at their experience of attachment, what attachment meant to them, and what unfolded over a 5-month period of talking and playing and investigating attachment as an issue was actually a group of 4 women who committed to making something with me over a long period of time. I can't tell you the bravery and the courage of those women to commit to the process, a process that they'd never been involved in before, and also to share their darkest experiences, really, of trauma, violence and abuse. So the approach that I took was to listen, to sit in circles for a long time and really hear the stories that they wanted to tell. And they're not pretty stories, some of them, and they are full of trauma and difficulty. And at each point of the process, we checked in around the consequences of telling these stories, how it might be more exposing or more empowering, or both of those things, how it might make already vulnerable women feel more vulnerable, or perhaps more bold. And that was a constant tension in the work. Were we being too risky creatively and putting people's emotional states and vulnerabilities too high on the risk register, or actually by holding our nerve and presenting those stories were we actually in the long run going to empower them? And as an artist, that's the risk I took, and I hope it paid off. I believe it paid off. I believe the women now stand taller and stand more confidently holding their life stories. They have seen their stories crafted into something that they can recognise, that has made them see the patterns of their attachment anew, their attachment difficulties, say, anew. And I think that being involved in a creative process where they've been really listened to and then held their own and performed in front of 300 people at the Attenborough Centre in Brighton, and received a standing ovation for that work. I believe it's been very empowering for them. It's not been without its safeguarding issues, without its emotional and mental health risks, but we have managed those with Oasis's support throughout the whole process, and I think the results are quite extraordinary.
I can smell him close by. And I know what he's coming for.
The production was a one-off event, live at the Attenborough Centre at the University of Sussex in Brighton, to an invited and a paying audience of 300 people. And that happened on the 18th of October in 2018. It's been a fascinating collaboration with the women. They have stepped up to make the highest quality piece of work that they could make, with the great support of Antonia Grove and Robert Clark. There's been lots of interesting questions around how can you direct, hold a space and facilitate at the same time for me? How can performers perform to their best ability whilst caring and supporting vulnerable women who are still in recovery? We've had a huge amount of support from Brighton Oasis Project. We've had a volunteer and an integrative arts psychotherapist in the room for all of the work. So the safeguarding has been exceptionally managed, exceptionally well managed, but it hasn't been without its problems. I think the project has worked on many levels, and certainly for me it's been one of the most extraordinary and rewarding creative processes that I've ever been involved in. Everyone has a story to tell, and I think these women's stories deserve to be told.
Healthy. I made you. You are made of me.
I think for non-professionals and professionals to perform together, it takes a certain kind of process, a certain type of building of rapport, a certain holding of a space for those two groups of people to meet and make something that has meaning for both. But there's been so much learning that's gone on. It's taken a lot of skill building for the women and a lot of skill learning for the professional performers. And I think all of us have learnt a lot through doing this project that we can carry forward into both our lives and our practice as artists. Studying attachment gives you an insight into child development and how trauma in childhood causes great difficulty later in life. And as adults, these women have come into this process as adults who, even after years of recovery and therapy, are still trying to unpack what happened to them. And it is often what happened to them without their consent. And so it's raised all sorts of themes around consent, around violence, around abuse, around men and women and relationships and parenting that we tried to discuss and put into the work. And it makes for challenging viewing, and it makes you re-see women that you might otherwise stigmatise for where they are now, because you get a bit of an insight into their childhood difficulties that may have led to using or misusing drugs and alcohol later in life. I do think that this project has really helped them on their way to see with fresh eyes the possibility for hope, the possibility for change, that their bodies aren't ugly or too big or broken, but their bodies, if they work with them, can help them to live a more positive life and make different choices. Meeting people in a creative space can really transform their perception of themselves, because that's where it has to start. Women who are living with trauma and childhood difficulty have to start with their own bodies and growing to be more caring and loving towards their own bodies and minds. And from that position, they might then find it easier to follow a path of recovery rather than continue the damage and self-harm that many of these women have engaged with in the past.